Perfect.
Yeah. Thank you, Zoom lady. Thank
Yes.
you. They're like, hi, we need to let you know you're being recorded. I'm like,
Cameras rolling. Here we go. Well, thank you so much, Darcy, for being here. I've been wanting to talk to you for so long, ever since I came on one of your tours, which honestly, you set the bar high.
Oh, thank you.
I came with my sister, and a lot of times you kind of just go into it not knowing what to expect. And I loved your tour. You had us laughing the whole time. And it was so informative too, which I think is like the best combo.
I really appreciate that because that is really what I strive to do on the tours for Haunted OC. Because as somebody who's both an entertainer and a performer and also a historian, I really want to bridge the two together because one, I don't know who's coming on my tour, right? Like I can look at a manifest, but I don't know, their level of knowledge with history. I don't know their connection to history. And as somebody who also works with students, I think one of the biggest reasons that people don't like history is one, they don't see themselves in it, which with the way that history has been written in the US, it makes sense because it's been a lot about history for the winners and it's silenced marginalized voices for so long. And folks are trying to rectify that, which is great. That is part of my goal as well. So I think one, they don't see themselves in it. And two, if you don't make it relatable and build that bridge from the time you're talking about to now, how are people going to get interested in that? Like, okay, how's that affect me? Like, why, how do I even think about that in my real life? So that is a very high compliment. And I appreciate that so much.
It was
and,
so succinct.
and that you think I'm funny. That is key. Cause I'll tell you, people could say a lot of things about me, but people say that I'm not funny. There might be a fight.
No, honestly, I feel like I was like the tour guide's pet. Like I was your pet the whole time because you were just keeping us laughing. I had so many questions, and it's like you took all of this knowledge and broke it down and made it so relatable in a way that no matter who was on the tour, they would all take away something and enjoy themselves.
Thank you so much. It makes me so happy. Like that, again, that's what I strive to do. So I'm really glad that you came away feeling that.
For sure. So let's start in the beginning. If you want to begin on sharing your journey of where you kind of found yourself in the spooky, have you always loved the paranormal?
Yeah, I have always been a pretty spooky kid. I It's funny because besides excuse me, I'm gonna take that again. Yeah, I've always been a pretty spooky kid, and besides the paranormal, I've always been like somebody who's fascinated with death, but I'm not goth. Like I know today I'm wearing like a spooky sweater, but or I'm like the cheeriest goth. I don't know. But I was always the kid that was checking out books at the library and ghosts. Like anytime there was like a summer reading program where we went to the library, it was like, okay, where are the ghost books? Where are the spooky stories? But I also grew up watching shows like In Search of with Leonard Nimoy and Unsolved Mysteries and when Amazing Stories came back on and Ripley's Believe It or Not and then Unsolved Mysteries, like all of those shows, there'd be like, and it probably is also what fed like my love of true crime because there'd be like, help us solve this murder. Also ghosts and Bigfoot. But yeah, I've always been into spooky stuff. And even when I was very involved in religious community in my teenage and early adult years, some people are like, you can't be, into that. And I just still was and just kept it real quiet. So but yeah, and we also have a family ghost story. And so I grew up hearing about ghosts and afterlife and not necessarily the afterlife in like a everyone goes to heaven, but like people go on. So I think to me it was just part of like, yeah, this is who I am, and my folks were, you know, uh, they encouraged it. They weren't afraid of it. There was like, okay, this is what she's into. So yeah, it's that has always been kind of my journey, I guess. And then coming back to it has been really amazing and rewarding and getting to connect with all kinds of amazing people. And it feels like, oh, I've met all of my best friends that I looked for as a kid, because there wasn't always spooky kids around or kids that were into the same things. And so now that we can connect in things like, you know, with the internet and social media and all that, it's like, oh, this is where you've all been. This is where we've all been all these years. So that is really, really neat. And for the listeners, I feel it's not fair to just be like, oh, we have a family ghost story and then move on. So I will tell that really quickly if you'll allow me, because I know someone's gonna be like, what? How do you just drop that? So when my parents were first together, they did a trip to England. And my mom really wanted to stay in this 4-poster, like in a place with a 4-poster bed. She was like, oh, I just like the romance of all that. And so they check into this place that's basically like a renovated castle, because England, and my dad was English. So they check into this place, having a great time, go to bed, and are woken up in the middle of the night by what sounds like fighting. And it's more my dad getting woken up and trying to get my mom to wake up and hear it. And I had said recently that it was like the both of those, mostly my dad hearing it. And just, he could not get back to sleep. He was just, what is going on next door? What is happening? Was just really upset. And so the next morning they went down to the front desk and said, like, what happened last night? And the front desk person was like, there's nobody in the room next to you. And it turned out that in the room, and the front desk person said, oh, they're early this year. And apparently these spirits usually showed up in the spring, and it was still winter. And and he talked about, the front desk clerk talked about how the man that used to own the manor, his surname was Staniforth, which is my last name, and that he had had an affair with the maid, gotten her pregnant, confronted her about it. They got into a fight. He killed her and then fed her to the pigs on the farm.
No way.
Yeah. So I had to just ask my mom recently. I was like, can you refresh that story for me? Because I think I'm getting some details. And I was like, oh, yeah. Okay. So it was like this. They showed up, I think, because of the Staniforth connection. And so it was a really, that was like the family ghost story. Like, I heard that all through my youth. So it's like, well, if they're hearing it, then this must be able to happen. This must be a thing. So yeah, that's the family ghost story.
That's wild. So do you think that they heard maybe them fighting?
Yeah, I think my dad thought that he heard them fighting and heard the whole thing, like the replaying of the whole thing. So I'm not sure if they would fall into more of like a residual haunting kind of deal, but it seems like my dad might have been the trigger object that night.
And maybe there's a connection somewhere down the line too, with the name and just the...
Yeah, he could have been like a distant cousin or some kind of relative. Like Staniforth in America is a name that people don't hear a lot. It is much more common in England, but at the same time, so far, most of the Staniforths I've met have been related to. So
It's a possibility.
it is a possibility, absolutely.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Before we get into a little bit on your tours, I did want to start off. I know you began your tour with a land acknowledgement, which I thought was super unique and super special. So I wanted you to share a little bit about maybe why you share the land acknowledgement and giving an example of what it is for people who don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first came to connect with the Heritage Museum through Haunted OC, I really wanted to make sure that I was working with folks that were working to do good history. And here's what I mean by good history: is history that acknowledges silences, history that acknowledges injustices, history that is not afraid to talk about difficult things and not romanticize them. Because especially in haunted tourism, you see it a lot. And I think there are a lot of people out there trying to do better, which I love and I appreciate. So the first thing I asked our former director, Jamie, is, do we do a land acknowledgement here? Because in working in the world of higher education, especially, we see land acknowledgements a lot. And so for those of you who don't know what a land acknowledgement is the fact that we are all on indigenous land here in the United States. And there's definitely, obviously, other countries that are also on indigenous land. And so a land acknowledgement, if done well, can be a really good starting point to fill in that silence of history, saying like this, even though we might say this is our space or our place, like it's truly stolen land, it's native land. And so the museum, Heritage Museum of Orange County, and the Gospel Swamp, which is pristine swampland that is also on the grounds, were originally belonged to the Tongva people. And so as I was asking Jamie that, she let me know that they were at that time working with their the Tongva people that they have relations with and that they work with to create the land acknowledgement. So the land acknowledgement that we do at the top of the tour was created in partnership with our Tongva friends and family. And so for me, it just became this, like, this is how we're going to start this, because I think sometimes, especially when people come on a tour, they're expecting their tour guide to be the knowledgeable one and to be the one who is going to set the tone. And so for me, it's just like, hey, we're just going to start with this. And we're just all going to take a moment to kind of be quiet, listen, acknowledge that, and then we can get into the rest of the tour. Because for me, it is a reminder of the fact that we are on indigenous land, and there are some great ways for folks to find out if they're on indigenous land, which they are, whose indigenous land ultimately they're on. You can actually type in your zip code in this search engine. I think it's called Whose Land Am I On? Or whose land is this? I will get that to you, Tim. And it will tell you what tribes were in the area that you live or work on. And so knowing that we have that relationship with the Tongva community is really important. And especially in the fact that there is a story on the tour that could possibly be linked to an indigenous spirit. I don't feel that it's right to just be like, oh, this could be an indigenous spirit, and then not acknowledge the greater aspects of that. And so it makes me very happy that we have that. And for folks that have never encountered a land acknowledgement, like many people are not necessarily going to encounter a land acknowledgement in their everyday lives because they're not necessarily working in educational spaces. And so I think it's a really good starting point for us to educate people, to open the door for folks, right? And I've had people come to me after the tour and express their gratitude on it, which is fantastic, and say, you know, I really appreciate that. And they've come from different spaces or different states. And so having that has become a really important part of doing that good history. And especially because I'm very, I have great affection for it because of the fact that it was created, like I said, in partnership with the Tongva folks that the museum works with. So it wasn't just the museum saying, oh, we're going to create this, we hope you like it, because that also just adds to colonialism and an oppression. But they actually worked with them to say, this is the land acknowledgement we would like. So that's the land acknowledgement.
That's awesome. It's like you had their blessing, and just that moment of all taking a second to pay their respects and honor everyone and everything that has happened on that land before, I think is so important.
Thank you.
Because there have been times, even since going on your tour, like I would go out to Joshua Tree, and I would bring like my sound bowls and all of this. And if you're doing like healing work, energy work, or even just being there, um, I've been inspired by you after having that, just to set that intention of, this is not my land, obviously, but I want to pay respect to everyone who has had their time on this land.
Yeah, and I love that. Thank you for sharing that, because we don't I think we don't always think about who's come before us. We get here, and I see it, again, working with students who just think like, it's been this way. And I'm like, no, there was a lot of people that had to come before you to get you to here. And I love the spaces in, acceptance and looking towards equality and equity for people. I love this space. Like, people ask questions sometimes, would you like to have been born in another time? No, I'm really good here. I'm really good here. But all the people that came before us, all the people who had to fight, all the people who went through pain and sacrifice and less for us to have more is incredible. And not just in like, thanks so much for that, but thinking about ancestors and thinking about other people's ancestors. And we are a country that was built on 2 massacres, as James Baldwin says. And so I think it's so important to take that moment. I kind of had a similar moment when I was at the Santa Barbara mission a couple of summers ago. And they have this big, beautiful lawn out there. And I took my shoes off to ground. And then I just sat there and I apologized. Like, I apologized to all of the indigenous folks. And I really hope I'm not coming across to anyone who's listening as a like white savior or anything like that, because that's not my intention. But just this idea that they were like, their whole culture was stolen and corrupted. And now it's this tourist attraction, and so, and I don't know if you still did this when you were in school, but like, we built missions in 4th grade. Like, build your mission, choose a mission and build it. So this reinforcing of the colonialism and the oppression. So yeah, it's very, I think acknowledging those who've come before us is so important, especially when we're in spaces and doing work that has all been influenced by the people that have come before us too.
Yeah, for sure. I actually just found out about the mission, the building school project. I'm from Ohio originally, and that didn't exist.
Yes, California, that would be why.
But a lot of things, it's weird. It's been popping up a lot, and I just hear about it out of nowhere. But yeah, I thought.
Oh yeah, we built them out of sugar cubes in my day, and then eventually they started selling kits. Like, you could go to Michael's and buy mission kits. And so as I got more into American studies and started unlearning the things I had learned, I remember talking to different 4th grade teachers, my aunt being one of them. I'm like, do you still make them build missions? She's like, oh, no. We don't build missions anymore, but there are still some places.
Yeah. Like a gingerbread house, but a mission now.
Yeah, but a mission. And then you would do a mission report. And it was all around the narrative of look how the Catholic Church like saved these people.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I want to transition into the Heritage Museum and the Kellogg House, because you are the queen of the Heritage Museum and the Kellogg House. And I would like you to just share maybe a brief history of both of those, the land, and kind of what you do there.
Sure. So the Heritage Museum of Orange County serves a lot of purposes, but for folks that have been to the museum before, many of them came as children, because the Heritage serves as a hands-on learning museum for kids to learn about what it was like in Victorian times. I will have folks on my tour who they said they came as kids. I'm like, did you churn buttermilk in a jar? Did you? And yeah, I did that. We have a blacksmith shop on the grounds as well, so they learn about those kinds of things. So that's one aspect of the Heritage. But the Heritage also has an incredible amount of beautiful space and land on it. And so there's the Gospel Swamp Farm. So it's a working farm at the back of the grounds. We have, like I said, the blacksmith shop, which just reopened because the former blacksmith shop unfortunately had burned down. We rebuilt, the museum rebuilt, and we have a new blacksmith shop, which is incredible. And with the blacksmith shop reopening, it brought bats back to the ground. So it's always fun to see the bats flying overhead, my little sky puppies. Then we have and like I said, the grounds are beautiful. And so people have weddings there. I've known people that have gotten married there. And we have lots of different events there. A giant Easter egg hunt every Easter where they hide 5,000 to 8,000 eggs on the grounds for the kids from the community to go find. There is a horror nights coming as a fundraiser for the Mag farmhouse, which is the other beautiful house that needs a lot of care that is also on the grounds. And so that fundraiser is coming in February. And then we have the Kellogg house, which is the house that we primarily tour. On the tour, we start in front of the Mag because, as I tell everyone, we're not going to stop anywhere there's not stories. And then we move to the Kellogg. The Kellogg house, the Mag farmhouse, really quick, 1899 is when the farmhouse, its water tower, and its carriage house, which are all on our grounds, were built. And then the Kellogg house, built in 1898 by H.C. Kellogg, Hiram Clay Kellogg, as a gift to his second wife, Helen Kellogg. And it has been on the museum grounds since the 80s. It's been fully refurbished into its Victorian glory. Such a stunning house. And the Kellogg family is still involved with the museum, which is really great. And so the Heritage Museum of Orange County does so many incredible things all year long, between what we do at Haunted OC, like I said, Easter egg hunts, weddings, there's markets. Creep It Real was there. They've done event, like they also, the museum also does other exhibits. Like they last year, at the end of last year, they had an incredible civil rights exhibit. They've had photography exhibits. They've had all kinds of different things. So it is a fully functional museum, but it just depends on what aspects are kind of up at any given time. And it is a museum that has public hours every Sunday from 10 to 2. And so folks can come and walk around and explore and then come back for a lot of the other events. But one of the things that I love about the Heritage is that it is very tied into the community. And it is a space for a lot of low cost or no cost events. So people can come and engage with so many of the things there. And they have an incredible social media person who makes sure that the word gets out, and the staff there just is really working to take care of this incredible space. And it's just really a magical place. And I think for anyone that works at a museum, and especially like kind of a smaller museum in a sense, I mean, we have a lot of grounds, but we're still a smaller team. It's a labor of love. And I am in love with the Kellogg, and I'm in love with the museum as a whole.
And it's so beautiful too, just walking around the grounds and just seeing around there. Yeah, there's so much history, and
rose gardens and fountains, and the place where most people have their wedding ceremonies, this beautiful lawn area that backs up to a gazebo. I mean, it's stunning. It's just stunning grounds. And that's one of the cool things about the tour, is that people can come on after dark, which is not normally when we're walking around the museum grounds.
And at that point, you get a totally different perspective.
Totally. Absolutely. And it looks beautiful lit up at night. And we have a beautiful dance floor area behind the Kellogg house where a lot of events are held, but you can walk around, and there's a beautiful trellis covered walkway in between the Kellogg and our orange grove. So there's just a lot of romance and magic, I feel, there. And not in a, what do I want to say? Like, it's not in a forced way. Like, I think some places are like, look at us, look at how we've made this. And you're like, those are cheap silk flowers or whatever. Like, it's a lot of beautiful landscaped glory. And we have an incredible team that keeps those grounds looking as amazing as they do.
Like seeing it, you can, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, everyone on the team loves the museum, and they take just such care, and it reflects in everything that you see.
Yeah, just looking at it, it looks like it would have looked in those days too. It's like, if you know, it would be, the 1800s or early 1900s.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the Kellogg House especially. Can you tell us a little bit about that and the design of it and the layout? Because it's totally unique, at least from anything that I've ever seen before.
It is. And I joke on the tour a lot that it is Helen's house because it is. It's absolutely Helen Kellogg's house. And we feel that Helen is still in the Kellogg house. But Hiram, who designed it, that is very much Hiram's design eye in so many aspects. So the Kellogg is a Queen Anne Victorian with neoclassical elements. And this is really important because some people have put down that it is a neoclassical. It is not, because neoclassical is symmetrical, whereas Queen Anne Victorians are not symmetrical. And the Kellogg is definitely not symmetrical. And it has a tower. It has the tower side, which if you're looking from the outside, you don't see it quite as much, but that tower is made up of the first floor dining room and the second floor primary bedroom and those curves. Hiram loved sailing in ships so very much. And so the house has a lot of nautical touches to it. It has a widow's walk on the top of the house, which is, if folks are not familiar with what that is, sometimes you look on top of an old Victorian house and you see like this little gate at the top. And that gate was for houses, usually that sat near harbors, so people could go up and look to see if their loved ones were returning safely from sea. It did not get the name Widow's Walk because they did all the time. So that would be the idea of like walking around and them never returning. So we have a Widow's Walk. The dining room was designed after a captain's quarters on a ship, and it has a very unique oval shape to it. It's stunning. It's a really beautiful, beautiful design, but it is very unique in the way that it is designed. But again, he loved sailing in ships. He had been in a captain's quarters for dinner and then decided to design the dining room like it, which is amazing. And then to really drive home the point of how much Hiram loved sailing in ships, the house is designed, like built really around, including the staircase, is built around a ship's mast that runs the entire length of the middle of the house. And it's a decommissioned ship's mast that Hiram found in San Francisco. He'd already designed the house one way, saw the ship's mast. No, I'm redesigning the house, and redesigned it around the ship's mast. So while the house itself is 125 years old, the ship's mast is over 250 years old. So it's a really incredible piece of history that this entire house is built around.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, there's so much as you're walking through just to look at, and just the little details here and there, even the staircase, the way that it kind of curves up and around. I just remember it was so beautiful.
That
Uh,
staircase is stunning. It's such intricate carved detail. And then the way it flows around the mast, and then into the other thing I should note is the attic is an open concept attic. Sounds very it sounds very architectural nerd, but it's an open concept attic. So if you don't understand how that could be, come tour with me and you'll see.
yeah, it is. It's something you have to like physically experience just to get the full effect that the
Yeah.
listener get by just us talking about it. But do you have any ghost stories? I know you mentioned on the tour that it was like a very happy place for the most part, and the energy that I felt when I was going through it didn't feel evil or bad in any way. It seemed like a time capsule. So I'd be curious to see if you have any personal ghost stories, or if you know of any experiences that people may have had in the house.
Oh, where to start? For sake of time. No, I mean, I want to say I agree with you. I don't think that the house has malicious spirits at all. I don't feel that, and I'm a pretty sensitive person, so I've definitely been in other spaces where I'm like, oh no, thank you, I'll be leaving now. Goodbye. But the Kellogg is a really unique space again, and we think we have three intelligent spirits and one residual haunting on the tour, or in the house on the grounds that I talk about on the tour. But yeah, I've had personal experiences, other people have had personal experiences. So, and sometimes they happen during the tour. So the house can be very, very active. And then sometimes it's very quiet. And so it just depends. Normally, I can tell what kind of night we're going to have the first time I walk in the house when I go to get ready for tour, because I get ready for the tour in the house. I get dressed in the house and everything just to kind of settle myself and get ready. One of the last tours I had at the end of November, and that's when the guys from Bigfoot Collectors Club were with me, and we had a full tour, and we were all in the dining room, and from the dining room you could hear footsteps in the primary bedroom upstairs, and a bunch of people were like, what is that? Where is your staff? And my museum staff was right there, and there was nobody upstairs, for sure nobody upstairs. So footsteps. That grandfather clock has started during tours, it has started after tours, and it has started before I've come into the house. So I'll come in, and the first thing I always look at is that grandfather clock to see if it's set at midnight or not. And there's a lot of times it has been running. Now, folks are thinking, but Darcy, it's a clock. Shouldn't it be running? We're in and out of the house so much we don't keep them wound because it wouldn't stay on accurate time. So that grandfather clock is a really, really active piece in there. And we've had some changes to the house, like good things. The staff has been really doing a great job putting up beautiful curtains in the house, these like lush, like velvety curtains that make it feel even more cozy. And the house just came through being decorated for the holidays, which is always so magical. But in the primary bedroom, one of the things when I started the tours that was there was Helen and Hiram's official wedding photos. And a couple months ago, they got moved to another wall and an oil painting took their place. And I honestly don't think Helen liked that. I think Helen was kind of bummed out because the picture of Hiram's first wife still had prominence in like the second floor hall, where her wedding photos were now like to the side. And so another new artifact, which is a pair of Helen's glasses, had been found recently. Those got swapped out and put in a shadow box and put onto that wall where that oil painting had taken the place of the wedding photos. And I told Corey, our wedding and events coordinator, I said, Corey, the glasses look great, but I think Helen wants her wedding photos back. He's like, I'll do it tomorrow. And so Helen and Hiram went right back up on each side of Helen's glasses. And during the time those wedding photos were to the side, Helen was pretty quiet. Like I honestly was like, oh, did she finally leave? Like what's happened? And as soon as those wedding photos were back, she's like shown up again. And I to me, I'm like, oh, she was showing her disdain. Mm-hmm. She was showing her disdain for her wedding photos not being there. But I've definitely felt her around. Sometimes personally, I've experienced some smells. Like, because we talk about a story in the house that involves fire, and sometimes in the stairwell, I'll smell fire, which is interesting. And of course, I use my, detective skills and go outside and go, do I smell fire out here? Nope, just in that stairwell. So, smelt fire. I've seen somebody on the stairs out of the corner of my eye, like a man. I'm like, oh, okay, don't know who that was. So
I've a full body apparition, or you just kind of saw it with your mind's eye or a shadow? I'm just curious.
I wouldn't say full body apparition, but it was definitely, there was a man there. So maybe a mixture of mind's eye and just sensing, I don't know. But it was like, oh, there was a man on the stairs, and no old-timey dressed person was on the stairs or on my tour. And then most recently in the children's room, we have one of those dog pull toys, the kind that you pull and it has like the wonky wheels, so it kind of goes up and down and its ears flap, and it sits on this rocking chair. And as the entire tour entered that room, that toy like came off that rocking chair, like it got yanked down. Nobody had stepped on it. Nobody had pulled it off. And what was really interesting is because it's sitting on a rocking chair, I looked over, the chair's not rocking. So if you had went to pull that down, the chair would be rocking. And so afterwards I tried to debunk that and see like what's going on. And I couldn't get it to do the same yank down without the chair rocking. So some things show up at times, and I've gotten just some weird feelings in the house. I was in the children's room once, and I'm in the middle of giving the tour, and all of a sudden I felt like the entire house was just listing to the left, and it was very strange. And I had to I'm still talking, and I had to take a moment, be like, in my mind going like, the house is not shifting to the left. You're fine. Something's going on. Just keep going. And so I had to get my bearings again, but it just, things happen. And there's been so many little things here and there, and I try and keep track of a lot of them, but I also think that there are things that I maybe not experience anymore because I'm in the house so much. I had a guest once feel like he had gotten like a chest impact. I had to make sure he wasn't having a heart attack or a panic attack, but he's just like, did something happen in the rear parlor? Because like my chest just feels like I got an impact. So that was interesting. I've had folks, we think that there's a little boy in the house. And lately the name Nicholas keeps coming up a lot. So I'm not sure if his name is indeed Nicholas, but I refer to them as little ones. And then I'm like, are you Nicholas? Like, give me a sign on that. I haven't gotten confirmation, but I've had folks hear giggling and running in the house. A guest was on the tour and she was taking a photo under the stairs and felt like someone was holding on to her leg in a cute way, not in a scary, I'm dragging you down to hell kind of way, but like a cute, I'm holding on to your leg. And then I had a tour recently where two folks from different parties all of a sudden was like, who was that? And just saw someone darting up the stairs. So the little boy seems to be probably one of the, like, Helen and he are the two most active, it seems like, in the house. And the little boy just seems to be having a good time and playing with everyone. So yeah, there's a lot that goes on. And I tell people at the top of the tour, this isn't a rigged tour. We're not, it's not jump scares. Nobody's going to come dressed as, a doll or something and scare you. But I say, but things happen on the tour, and they do. So
That's awesome. Yes, you have your fair share of activity.
Oh yeah.
In that house. It's a full house. One of the other things that I was so drawn to that you spoke about on the tour are Victorian funerals and mourning.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing. So I'd love for anyone who doesn't know about that era and anything that deals with that, for you to explain it a little bit. Maybe starting with the time period and why the Victorian movement people were so obsessed with death.
Yeah, I think it's such a foreign concept for us in modern times because we're so death avoidant. We're a death avoidant and grief avoidant culture. And a big part of my academic work is around death, dying, and grief in American culture. And when you get into that, the first thing you kind of get into usually is the Victorian death culture. So one of the reasons why Victorians were so obsessed with death is because it was everywhere. It was part of their lives. And the mortality rates were very high for children, for adults. Us living into our 70s and 80s and our 90s and, even past 100 was not really a reality for most Victorians. And so they married younger, they had children younger, but they also died a lot younger. And the person that sets a lot of the tone for the Victorian mourning practices is Queen Victoria herself. Because Queen Victoria, after her husband died, who she loved so very deeply, she went into mourning for the rest of her life by choice. Now, there are very specific mourning rules for women. This is where gender roles come in during that time. And this moves, I want to say really quickly, this moves along the gender binary of male and female. That is not to say that there were not folks, non-binary folks and people on all ends of the gender expression spectrum, but societally, the gender binary was what was observed, male and female. Women, after a significantly close relative died, husband, child, brother, parent, went into full Victorian mourning for 2 years. No accessories, no color, all black. Sometimes a veil, things like that, just all black, 2 years. After that 2 years is up, they go into half mourning, which lasts about 9 months, where they can start to bring in like a little bit of color, a little bit of like grays, dark purple, things like that, but still primarily black. And then they went into the final stage of mourning, which lasted 3 to 6 months, depending. And that's when they could start to lessen the black, bring in again, still more white, gray, purple, like into the black. It still wasn't like, oh, bright orange or anything like that. But the rub was that if they got very close to, let's say they got halfway through or close to the end, and another significantly close family member died, they started that process all over again. So while Queen Victoria chose to spend the rest of her life in mourning, many Victorian women ended up spending the rest of their lives in some form of mourning because of how high the mortality rates were. Men had a different, what a surprise. Men were not going to be taking care of the children. They were not going to be staying at home. Because there is a concept we talk about a lot in history known as the public and the private spheres. So the private sphere is the sphere of home and children and domesticity, and the public sphere is the politics, the working world out in the public, the domain of the male and the domain of the female being the private sphere. And so men were going back out, and they might be wearing like a dark suit, or, you know, signifying with some form of mourning ribbon or something like that, but they were not held to those same times, those same rules of mourning as women were.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, and like I said, like if their wife died, they might be out getting a nanny or trying to find a new wife, because they're not going to stay home in those times and take care of the children. It's very different. And Victorians had death in the home. Many Victorians laid out the body of their loved one in the home before it was buried. But we're also talking about a time where you could bury in a churchyard for sure. Like definitely plenty of people buried in churchyards or family cemeteries or private cemeteries. Or community cemeteries, right? So if you are a tapophile like I am and love to go to cemeteries, when you go to those older cemeteries, a lot of times they're usually established for the community that is around them. So a lot of the Kelloggs are buried at Anaheim Cemetery or interred at Anaheim Cemetery, because many of them are in the community mausoleum, not in the ground. But the Anaheim Cemetery is for residents of Anaheim. So you have to have an Anaheim address to be buried there. And so these spaces, which were just part of the community. Another thing that comes about in Victorian times is because the Civil War happens, 1861 to 1865. And that's where we see the invention of embalming. Mm-hmm. Because the Victorians, outside of very specific norms about mourning, also had very specific criteria for dying a good death. The term the good death comes out of Victorian mourning culture, if folks have heard that before. And one of those things was to have a proper burial. A lot of times people say it as a proper Christian burial. So when embalming happens, if a family, one, was fortunate enough to find their loved one on the battlefield, because one of the things people forget about the Civil War is we didn't have a national way to identify people. Like our soldiers now have dog tags and different identifiers if they go into battle. This was the first like American war on American soil between Americans. And so people were not, that wasn't a consideration. It becomes a consideration afterwards. There's a really great book that talks about it called This Republic of Suffering. It's a fantastic book by Drew Gilpin Faust, but it's something people have to consider. And so if you were lucky enough to find your loved one and then could pay to have them embalmed. If there was enough of them to actually do embalming, you could then pay to have them shipped home where they could have that proper burial. And so embalming becomes this new thing. And we also see the rise of the undertaker. So whereas folks used to take care of their dead at home, the undertaker becomes this professional who starts taking over. Not that they didn't exist before, but they start becoming more of the expert. And at the end of the Victorian era, death starts to move out of the home. One, because of the rise of like the death expert. Two, because we go from being more rural to more urban, right? So people didn't have the same kind of space in their homes with, a front parlor and a rear parlor and all of these spaces. So people start living in smaller places. Wealth shifts, where people are living shift. All these things start to push death to the outer parts of the city and the county. And so cemeteries start the migration of becoming outside of our everyday living. It doesn't happen immediately. But if you look at something in LA, you've got the amazing Hollywood Forever in LA, which is just, if anyone hasn't gone to Hollywood Forever yet, or if you're planning a trip to California and like Tim and I, you love spooky stuff, go to Hollywood Forever. It's a magical land of dead people and monuments, and it's amazing. It's just its own magical place. But there are two other really big parks in LA, which are Forest Lawn. And the man that took over Forest Lawn, his goal was to take death out of the cemetery. And so it doesn't become a cemetery. And a cemetery, traditionally, this is real nerd stuff, but cemetery means it's an upright monument, whereas a memorial park is all flat. And so when you go to the Forest Lawn parks, most of them you will see are all flat. They don't have a lot of upright monuments, and the upright stuff you see is usually statues. So his goal, because he was a very religious man, very Christian, he felt that like nobody's actually dead. They have an everlasting life. And so he worked to erase death from the memorial park in a lot of ways. And it starts to shift the culture. Whereas the Victorians used to like picnic in cemeteries, and not because they were necessarily visiting a loved one, but because like that was just a place that you went. So we start to see this cultural shift in things, and the Victorians, outside of being, having these rules and these ideas about how death should look, also very sentimental. And we see mourning jewelry, hair wreaths, a lot of stuff.
I'm going to bring up the hair wreaths, which we
yeah.
see in person. I'm going to put a picture, like when we post this episode, I'm going to put a picture on there so people listening can have a visual to it, but that's really interesting.
Yeah, the hair wreaths, the hair work stuff is amazing. And it was a way to hold on to your loved one, because we have to remember that in those times, photography is still very new and very expensive and very timely. And so people would take loved one's hair, a lock of their hair, and have it woven into a bracelet or a watch fob or put in a brooch. Or you could take
baby doll. Was there a baby doll that you showed us that had baby's hair?
Yeah, we have a Victorian mourning doll, and these dolls would be oftentimes fashioned after the child that passed, and they have the hair of the child on their head, and then the back of the head is flat, so that when you laid the doll out either on a grave or in a bassinet or on a pram or something, the doll wouldn't like roll back and forth like if you took a normal doll and laid it down. And so we have one of those on our tour, and she's very special. People get creeped out by her, which I don't think there's anything to be creeped out by, but I'm also very comfortable talking about death. Right. And so in the house we have two hair wreaths. We have what I call a hair boutonniere, because it just looks like you'd put it on a lapel pin. And then we have the Victorian mourning doll. And then I wear a Victorian mourning brooch on my dress when we're touring that people can see. So they have different examples of what these things look like from those times.
Interesting. Yeah, just the concepts and the way that people view death in that time and just the transformation, like you said, within those years, the whole society had shifted. And something else that you mentioned that I'd like you to share, and I'm not going to phrase it as well as you are, with the living room and maybe where the wake was in the house, and then the Saved by the Bell.
Yes. So the we have our living rooms in our house, and I have to thank my brother for this factoid that I bring in. But I asked people, why do you call it the living room? And I went, oh, it's the room we live in. Absolutely, right? It's the room we live in. However, the living room used to be called the front parlor in Victorian homes, because in the rear parlor is where if somebody died, you would lay out the dead, and the living would stay in the front parlor. And so thus it becomes the living room. So people are talking about death even when they don't understand that they are, when they talk about their house all the time. And then Saved by the Bell comes in that certain folks were buried either with a bell in a casket, or sometimes a contraption that would come out of the casket with a bell on the outside of the grave, so that if they happened to accidentally be buried alive, they could ring that bell so that somebody would come and unbury them.
I know that's wild. Just these things we use today that we don't really realize where they came from.
Right. It's not about Zach Morris and Jesse. It's about, like, please don't bury me alive.
So, along with all of your tours, you also have your podcast.
Yeah,
Decoded podcast. If you want to share a little bit about your experience with that, I listened to all the episodes and I loved just the topics that you covered and the conversation. So, if you want to just share a little bit about that and what that was like.
Absolutely. So I was honored to get to do a season of a podcast for the CW, as a sister, but also extension to the show Mysteries Decoded, which is hosted by the amazing Jen, and she has different guest hosts on. But we wanted to do a podcast as kind of a companion piece, but also then explore some other things. And so we did 8 episodes and started in the end of 2019 and then finished in 2020. So obviously we were adapting to a shifting world, but in putting together the podcast, I wanted to bring in some amazing people, some that were friends and some that have become friends, which has been really incredible, to know that our spooky interests can bring people together, and getting to talk about these paranormal things, this high strangeness, these odd situations for many people, but in a fun way, but also sometimes an academic way, because I'm going to bring my American Studies lens to everything all the time. So it was just a really incredible experience. And to get to hear stories that, you've maybe heard these folks on other shows or podcasts before, and then suddenly a new story comes up. And I think my one hope that I had that we didn't get to do is I was hoping that we were going to get to do a whole, extras release so people could fully hear all those episodes, because not all the episodes, all the interviews from those episodes, because in the podcast, you're hearing someone like John Tenney that's cut down to like 15 minutes. And we talked for 2 hours, and I would have loved to, have released those as full, like, here's the full interview, because then it's like you run the gamut on things. But it was a really good time. I had an incredible team behind that, and again made friends. You hear me talk in the end credits about Joshua Sterling Manley, who that show wouldn't have sounded as good without him. He was just so fantastic in helping it all sound as good as it did. And just getting to work with really cool people and have a space to have these conversations. And I think sometimes I think the thing that I hope it does is that maybe the folks that are not necessarily hunting down the paranormal podcasts that you and I might hunt down find this a little bit like of an accessible way into the world of the paranormal. And I've even used a couple episodes of the podcast with my students. The episode about black-eyed children about Bigfoot because of Dr. Adam Golub and Dr. Andrea Kidda, who are both these incredible academics who get to do work about high strangeness in the paranormal. Like you too can have a doctorate and teach on these things. So, just trying to show folks all different sides of it. I'm sad we did not get another season, but that is, the way of the entertainment world sometimes, and changes in that. But I am so grateful that it is out there in the world and it exists. And again, really the most grateful for the friendships that came out of that, like the continued friendships of some of the people I already knew, but the new friendships that really came out of that show.
Yeah, it was awesome. And it just had so many unique subjects like the black-eyed children. So I'm glad you brought that up because that's something I never knew anything about before. And just hearing the stories that you talk about and the ideas of what it could be, and it was just an awesome experience. So thank you. And I
Thank
think you
you.
should totally continue it, even if it's a different form of sharing this information and you have different guests. I think you should totally find that space to where you can kind of create your next project with something along those lines.
Yeah, there are some things in the works. Like I've got two big projects that I'm not saying too much about. I'm getting into magical thinking about them that this next year is going to be the beginning of. So keep your eyes and your ears out.
I'm excited. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I do want to ask, I know you mentioned before that there were a couple places that you had been to before that you kind of wanted to like run the other way because you could feel the energy. Do you have any spots that you've been to that you would consider being either super haunted or something you picked up on?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely spaces where I'm like, I can feel so many things here. One of the ones that is local is the Queen Mary. I mean, the Queen Mary, yes, notoriously haunted, but I feel like whenever I'm on that incredible ship, and I love her so much, I'm so glad that she is open to the public and they are continuing in with all the magic that she is. I just feel like I can feel all of the people that have come through there because thousands and thousands and thousands of people have come through there. But I'm a member of the Art Deco Society of Los Angeles, and the Art Deco Society used to hold their big Art Deco like convention event on the Queen Mary. And so we'd all go stay for a couple days and listen to nerdy lectures and then dress up very fancy at night and have a good time. And so when I was staying there, like picking up smells that made no sense. Also had some of the weirdest, worst nightmares of my life staying on the Queen Mary before too. So I don't know what that was about, but it was just, they were very vivid and I don't know why they were happening because like what they were about at that time had nothing to do with what had been experienced. So the Art Deco Festival was a fantastic time there, but I just love the Queen Mary. So I feel a lot in the Queen Mary. And yet I've gone to places like in San Diego, they talk about the Whaley House being like the third most haunted place. Nothing. Like nothing in the Whaley House. I've been to the Whaley House a number of times, never had anything. Don't feel it. I'm like, come on, come to me. Nothing. So that's like, okay. Local to me in Santa Ana as well, and connected with Haunted OC is the Howe Waffle House. And that was the house of the first female doctor in all of Santa Ana, Wilhelmina Howe Waffle. And that house, I have activity in every time I go. Every time I go. That is one of the few places I've ever felt, though, something where I was like, oh, I need to go back downstairs. Like I went upstairs. I was on an investigation and our group was on the first floor. The other half of the group was on the second floor. And then we were going to switch. Or the groups were going to switch and the investigators, we were going to stay on the first and second floor. And I went upstairs to get the other group and was just like, oh no, I'm not supposed to be up here right now. Like, just so it was so evident. And I haven't felt that every time I've gone in the house and gone upstairs. I've been in that house a lot of times, but it was just, it really took me back, and I tried to pay attention to that. I get more sensitive, not in haunting stuff, but I also have a very high sense of weird danger. Like, so one of my work colleagues is more than happy to share the story of when we were on a trip to Sacramento, and we went to this mermaid bar, like, because it had women dressed as mermaids swimming around. Who doesn't want to see mermaids? And we walked in there, we're all excited, and we're in not even 5 minutes, so we got to go. We're like, why? I'm like, we just have to go. And we get out, and not very long after we left, shortly after we left, a stabbing happened in the bar.
Oh, that's
So
wild.
pay attention to things like that too.
And that's what I like to ask the people I talk to. And you said that you are sensitive and can
Yeah.
pick up things. How do you typically read energy? Does it come to you visually? Is it more of a knowing? I'm just curious of how you typically can sense things.
I tend to, I've gotten better at it because I didn't understand what it was for a long time, but I tend to just like feel it in my body.
Mhm.
And sometimes inadvertently, like, I'll walk through it, and then all of a sudden I'm like, why am I very sad? And I was like, oh, I just walked through somebody's very sad. That happens at the grocery store a lot for some reason. I don't know why. But I just tend to kind of feel it in my body. But I've also had to kind of put, I don't know, tips and tricks in place for myself, especially because of work I do with students and meeting with people all the time, that if I didn't try and like ground myself before meeting with folks, I would just be extra exhausted all the time. And if I'm not fully on my game of being aware of how much of myself I'm putting out there, I do end up very exhausted, but I just tend to feel it in my body.
Yeah, nice. Just a couple roundup questions I just wanted to ask you. And before we get to that, I wanted to make sure, I know you talked about the How Waffle House, and
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's on the Haunted Orange County Santa Ana tour,
Yep.
right?
Santa Ana tour. Absolutely.
Awesome. And I wanted to plug Haunted Orange County, and if you wanted to share just a few things about them, I've gone on almost all of their tours, not so much the recent ones that they just added, but I want to. But I love Haunted Orange County. I think they're amazing. It connected us together. I've met some
Right.
great people through there. So if you just want to share a couple things.
Absolutely. So one of the things I want to make people aware of is that we run tours all year long, all year long. And so a lot of times I think people think, oh, I can only find really spooky stuff at Halloween. No, no. As I say, every season is spooky season at Haunted OC. That's my own tagline for Haunted OC. So we run tours all year long. And so if you're like, I really want to go on a haunted historical tour, join us. We usually post dates a month or two ahead of time. I think Pasadena right now is booking out all the way until April. So folks definitely have time to get on that. And if you go to hauntedoc.com, that is where all of the tickets are under Ghost Walks. What people will get at Haunted OC is history and ghost stories. What they're not going to get is a rigged attraction, jump scares, things like that. And that's not me saying that those things are bad. It's just not what we do at Haunted OC. I'm not great with jump scares, so I would not be able to work in a space where there are jump scares all the time. But we do great haunted historical tours, and we're always working to make sure that the tours keep getting better and better all the time. So let me run down what different tours are running just so people know. They can do Old Town Orange, which is our original, most popular tour with Val. Val is amazing, and Val's been on this show. We love Val.
Love that.
So Old Town Orange, Downtown Santa Ana, which is what you mentioned. That's Tina's tour, and that is where you also get to connect with the How Waffle House. The Kellogg House, which also is in Santa Ana, that's my tour, but it is different than the Downtown Santa Ana tour. I bring that up because sometimes I get a call like, we have two of your people here, and they're not there. So the Kellogg House and the Downtown Santa Ana tour are different. San Juan Capistrano with Allegra. We have Fullerton with Joel. We have Pasadena that we have just, I'm sorry, Fullerton with Drew, not with Joel. Fullerton with Drew. We have Pasadena that we just added. We have Hollywood, which we just added, which is really incredible. And we have Black Star Canyon. And so these incredible spaces that you get to, learn the history of, tour with our incredibly knowledgeable ghost hosts, our tour guides. And it's just a really good time. But then we also do different events during the year, like our incredible morning exhibit that is wrapping up. And then other special things that come up. Sometimes the Disney Mansion shows up as a haunted tour, and that's not just at Halloween time. That can be at different times of the year. So we do all kinds of great events. And so if you find Haunted OC online or follow me, I try to repost a lot of stuff. But Haunted Orange County, I think we're the best at what we do. I really think we do a really good job. And all of our tour guides really work to make sure that their tours are the best they can be. And like you said, we want to educate and we want to entertain people.
Yeah, and you guys do the best job of it. It's like a community. It's awesome. And then just the last couple questions real quick. Do you have a dream location or locations that you'd like to visit?
Whoa. I mean, yes. I was like, there's so many, right? There's so many. I really, 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 I really want to do, and they don't do really a lot of investigations there, but one of my dream locations to just see what I can feel. So I really want to go to the Mark Twain house in Hartford, Connecticut, because that has been investigated. And as a Mark Twain nerd, like I'm a total, they call us Twainiacs. It's so nerdy, but I really want to go to the Mark Twain house in Hartford, Connecticut to see if I get some activity in that space. I want to do things like the Stanley and Waverly Hills and like some of those really, really big ones. But I'm really open to seeing, what is provided to me. Because I also know that like we have the big spaces that people always talk about. But like I said about the Whaley house, like everyone's like, oh, it's the third most haunted place. I've never had anything. And so I just look forward to with more of this community as people are like, do you want to come investigate this with us? Yeah, totally. And just doing investigations with people that are there to do good investigations and to, respect the space, respect the history, but also see what we can find. And so, yeah, I want to hit those big ones, but I'm also like, let's do a local ghost investigation. I'm down for that too, because you just never know what's going to show up when you go into a space.
Heck yeah, and it can be right in your own backyard. And just by talking with someone or having some weird incident or occurrence, who knows, you find new places all the time.
Absolutely.
Well, Darcy, thank you so much. I had the best time chatting with you. I know you didn't want to mention much about it, but is there anything that you feel drawn to or anything in the upcoming year in terms of tours or anything else that you want to share that you're doing that anyone can kind of come grab a tour?
Yeah, I mean, I'm running tours all year long. I'm not sure when this is going to come out, but tours for January and February are available, so folks can come join me at the Kellogg House. I'd love to have folks there. And if you heard me on Tim's podcast, let me know. Like, it's always great to be like, hey, I heard you on this. So come tour with me because I'll be running tours all year long, like I said, for the Kellogg. I've got some other appearances that'll be happening, but I don't know when those are going to be happening. But if people want to follow me on social media, it's at Darcy Staniforth. So it's DarcyStaniforth. And they're going to get, pictures of my daily life as well as, a lot of pictures of dogs and then my haunted stuff as well. So, as more projects come up, I'll definitely let you know, Tim. And maybe we can chat again as those things are. But I'm just looking forward to the new year and more